the International News Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Dunicic. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Join and engage in our growing international community. Now, today we're going to cover another dark topic. Our report last week was concentrated on alleged Russian war crimes that were occurring in different areas that Russian soldiers were withdrawing from. We took a particular focus on allegations of rape that were occurring against women. Today, we're going to focus on alleged Russian war crimes against children. Now, I do want to give a full disclaimer here. These are alleged crimes. They have not been proven yet, and until the war is over, clear and concise evidence, witness testimony, and other material and physical evidence of what did or did not occur is going to be impossible to attain until there is a peaceful environment for a proper investigation to be carried out. Now, realistically speaking, an investigation will be carried out. Evidence will be gathered. And if it becomes clear that these alleged crimes are actual ones that did occur, Russia, there will be pressure to have the soldiers that participated in this or the commanders that ordered this to be placed in some kind of war crimes tribunal, similar to the International Court of Justice that occurred for Yugoslavia, Rwanda, and other military conflicts. Now, realistically, Russia is not a country like the former Yugoslav dominant Serbian Republic. It's not a country like Rwanda. Russia is a powerful international entity. It is one of the world's superpowers, which means that Russia probably is not going to see any of its military forces sit inside any kind of war crime tribunal or have any kind of trial process brought up against them. This is why you don't see any military commanders, leaders, or other soldiers from countries like the United States, France, Germany, ever being tried for war crimes, despite the fact that they have probably committed them. Now, I'm not saying all soldiers in war do commit war crimes, but some do. That is just a reality. In every single conflict in contemporary history, in modern history, in ancient history, medieval history, any historical period that has had conflict, war crimes fundamentally do occur. Now, these are either systematic, coming from the very top and being used as a kind of strategy to crush the spirit of the people, or in the worst case, being used as a form of ethnic cleansing. Killing children and men is a way to eliminate an ethnicity. Raping women is a way to change the ethnicity of future generations. Now, that is in the worst case scenario. In other situations where it is not systematic, it's just soldiers committing war crimes in an atrocious war. Now, let's go into detail about what has been occurring in Bucha, or what has been discovered in the Ukrainian town of Bucha. It's very dark, and Russian soldiers have been accused of things such as torturing children, raping children, shooting them point blank, killing them in front of their families, and other crimes. Now, that cannot be constructed, but what can be constructed is that 16 bodies of children were found amongst the casualties of those that died in Bucha. So it is very clear and undeniable that these children were killed by the Russian military invasion. Whether or not they were war crimes is something that's going to have to be construed later, and evidence is being gathered. It is very important that a proper investigation is carried out. War crime trials are very complex. They have some of the best lawyers, both on the prosecuting and defense side, that the world has. This is international criminal law. Mistakes cannot be made in the investigation, and any form, shred, or piece of evidence must be gathered, and it must also be unbiased. But let's talk about children in war for a second. Why is it considered that crimes against children are the worst? For two reasons. One is the obvious one that is even redundant to point out. Children, unlike adults, have a complete inability to defend themselves. Even if adults are not combatants, they still have the ability to leave a conflict zone. They have the ability to run away. They have the ability to hide. They have the ability to join the resistance, pick up arms, and fight themselves. Children, because they're fucking children, don't have this ability. They cannot do this. Children go where their parents go, or if they've lost their parents, they go where their caretakers or orphanage or whoever is taking care of them in a time of war goes. If they're targeted and soldiers move in and the children are attacked, in every single case, these children have been defenseless. Yes, it has occurred where some militant groups in certain conflicts have militarized or trained child soldiers, which arguably, and in terms of military law and international law, does in that case make children a legitimate military target because a soldier has to defend himself. That has not been the case in Ukraine. Children in Ukraine are not being used as soldiers. These kids were completely defenseless. Now, not only is it the complete lack of defense that children have in war that makes crimes committed against them considered to be the worst that can occur in a war, but also because there is no legitimate military reason, period, to target children. Even killing civilians that are aged 18 to 60 has some kind of concrete argument that can be backed up. Now, it is monstrous, and I'm not saying that that should be done in war, that it's okay. I completely condemn those actions. I'm not condoning it. But nonetheless, when a military force targets or kills anyone between the ages of 18 and 60, they are, even if they are not a militant or a military combatant at the time, they can potentially become one. So essentially, any military force or the Russian occupying force, when it kills civilians between those ages, can make the argument that it was just doing so to defend itself in the future, a preemptive strike, if you will. And this argument can actually be made in Ukraine, especially regarding men, because the country and the government of Ukraine has forced, or not forced, but mandated that men between the ages of 18 and 60 stay inside the country and be prepared to fight or conscripted into the military if they have to be. The vast majority of men in Ukraine are already fighting. So the conclusion, or at least the argument in an international court, that targeting a civilian between these ages was legitimate can be made. Children are not going to become a legitimate military threat. Now, eventually the argument can be made that they will one day grow up and want revenge for what happened to their homeland and their families. But that is a terrible argument that is typically used in the context of ethnic cleansing. So that can be completely thrown out. Realistically, targeting children is something that is absolutely monstrous and heinous and completely unacceptable in any war. And it is something that needs to stop. Now, understand that children will die in every single war at the hands of every single military force, whether it is intentional or not. Things like collateral damage from bombings can occur, and that does happen with every single military force. America, when it has been involved in conflicts, especially in the Middle East, during airstrikes, has killed children, albeit unintentionally, but nonetheless killed children. Though there is a difference. If these children were killed deliberately, or at the very least, the soldiers that caused the deaths of these kids knew that these children would die by their actions, or they had shot them point blank, or they had tortured them, that is a level of monstrosity that is reserved for the worst kinds of conflicts, and it's something that needs to end. Ideally, it's something that will be prosecuted in the future, and it is important that it is prosecuted in the future, because when war crimes are not prosecuted, future attacks by any military force, and any military forces believe that they can get away with it. But for now, we need to think about all of the children and all of the civilians that are in Ukraine. It is very clear that alleged war crimes are occurring. What is undebatable is that a disproportionate amount of civilians and a disproportionate amount of children are dying. And if you don't have a war, you can't have war crimes. As I've stated before, this war needs to come to an end. A diplomatic window is open, but realistically, it seems that that's not going to be fulfilled. Vladimir Putin has recently stated that he is not going to leave Ukraine or stop his invasion until Russia's goals are met, primarily securing control of the Donbass, the eastern Ukrainian Donbass region. Volodymyr Zelensky has stated that he will not give up any portion of his country for peace, showing that both world leaders that are involved directly in this conflict are not going to compromise with one another. Nonetheless, I do think that the West and third-party countries, doesn't necessarily have to be the West, any country that's involved that wants to end this conflict can diplomatically push both sides to come to some kind of agreement. The sanctions against Russia should continue. They will push Russia to coming to some kind of compromise. But also, other diplomats, especially from the West and NATO, need to sit down and speak with the government of Ukraine and convince it to also be willing to make a compromise, because innocent people are dying on a daily basis. Thank you for tuning in. I will continue to report on what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on all over the world. This is a dark topic, so let's just keep in mind that people have died and try and be a little bit sensitive in the comments, but nonetheless, let's have a conversation about what's happening and an open discussion about how it can potentially be resolved. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you next time.